have been talking. Last week we started a new series called Connected. And the reason we're doing this series is because we are starting life groups. And I think it's important that we understand what life groups, what groups are all about. The importance of it. Because the truth is, there are things that happen on Sunday, or there are things that you will get in a group that you will never experience, or at least not experience on the level that you will on Sunday morning. You will not, if you come only on Sunday morning, there is so much that you're going to miss out on.
I'm not trying to say that, but I'm just like, if he's really in pain.
You see, in groups are a place where you feel like you belong. We talked about this last week. You feel like you belong. You know, one of the things that happens on Sunday morning, you know, we have that meet and greet time, right? In the middle of service, we do a couple worship songs and we say, hey, go greet somebody. And you guys are great. I love how you guys, man, you take forever, right? You're always going around greeting everybody. But the truth is, it's really kind of a hi-bye thing, right? You're not getting into deep conversations, although maybe that's why you're taking forever, right? To get back. I'm just kidding. But no, seriously, you're not getting into deep conversations. You're just saying, hey, how are you? And then you're moving on to somebody else and, hey, how are you? Oh, hey, good to see you. You know, that's about it. It's very surface, right? And that's about all that happens on a Sunday morning. There's not a lot of deep conversations. There's not a lot of deepness to the relationships. Because that's not what Sunday morning is designed for. We're going to talk about that later. In a group, there is a deeper connection that happens. Groups also provide accountability. That's what we talked about last week. We need people in our lives that are going to call us on things, right? They're going to call us on our stuff. They're going to say, whoa, you are heading in the wrong direction. You need to turn around. Now think about this for just a moment. If you came in on a Sunday morning and somebody you don't know or barely know came up to you during that meet and greet time and said, hey, buddy, you need to change direction, right? You are sinning right now, and you need to get your life on track. What are you going to think? You know, you're going to be like, are you kidding me? You don't have permission to speak into my life like that. You know, you don't, who are you? And that's the thing. In order to have somebody be able to speak into your life, there needs to be a relationship, right? I think that's sometimes why churches get a reputation for being judgmental. It's because we don't take the time to build that intimacy to where there is that permission, where we can speak into somebody's life and say, hey, man, I just want you to understand, there's something, you need to change this. You're heading in the wrong direction. You need to stop what you're doing. And that person can respect what's being said to them because there's that relationship. Groups are a place where you're going to be cared for. That's what we're going to talk about today. Groups provide that place where you know, these people are in my corner. When I go through something, I know they're going to be there for me and I'm going to be there for them. Because let's be honest, we all go through things, right? We all go through tragedies, crisis situations, things of our own making, things that other people do to us. I mean, we go through stuff, right? Well, listen to this. King Solomon wrote down a book of wisdom, and it's all the insights that he learned. And it's in the Bible, and it's called the book of Ecclesiastes. And in this book of the Bible, Solomon wrote down something that we all experience. He makes an observation about relationships that goes right to the heart of the importance of being in a small group. And let's talk about this just for a moment, okay? Ecclesiastes 4, 9 through 12. Ecclesiastes 4, 9 through 12. This is what it says. It says, 2 are better than 1 because they have a good return for their work. Now let me just make that, just dumb that down for you, just kind of explain that. It just means basically if you're going to paint your house, don't paint alone. okay? Get somebody to help you. It's better, right? How many of you can relate to that? Have you ever done a job and you're like, man, if I got some people to help me, it would be better. Many hands make light work, right? That's what this is saying. Hey, listen, 2 are better than 1. You're going to get more done. It's better. Then he goes on and he kind of gets to the tension around this idea, and he says this: if one falls down, his friend can help him up. His friend can help him up. My son Caleb, my middle son, he just played football. His first game, right, yesterday, and we all got to see it, and it was great. But one of the things that happened is there were some injuries, right, on the field. And what happens is the kids, they kind of lay there until whether a coach or somebody comes along and they help them up, right? And you've probably seen that maybe on a football field. And basically they put the arm around and they kind of lift up, and the kid kind of limps, but he's leaning on the coach, right? Leaning on that person who's helping him off the field because they can't walk on their own. There are going to be times in your life when you can't walk on your own. You need to lean on people. That's what this is talking about. Listen, if one falls down, his friend can help him up. But, he goes on, he says, but, this is where it gets real. This is where it takes us to the reason why this is so important for all of us. And this is interesting because this isn't just Old Testament stuff. This isn't New Testament stuff. This isn't just for Christians. If you're not a Christian in this room, this is wisdom that all of us can apply. And he says this is just common sense. But pity the man who falls and has no one to help him up. Have you ever seen someone fall financially who didn't have anyone that could help them? There was no one in their life that could help them up. Or maybe you've seen a couple fall in their marriage and there was nobody but family to help them up. Have you ever seen someone who had a serious illness in their family, or a serious illness between a husband and wife or one of their kids, and there was no one but family that could help them? Have you ever seen somebody fall morally and a husband's pleading for help or a wife's pleading for help and there's no one other than family to help? Now maybe you're sitting here saying, well, what's the problem with family? Family's great. I'm not knocking family, but listen to this. You can't choose your family. Your family's your family, right? And they may or may not be godly men and women. Am I correct? So you don't know the kind of advice, the kind of wisdom, the kind of help that you're going to get from family. It may not be what you need. And that's why it's so important that we have friends, godly men and women in our life who we know when the going gets tough, they're going to get underneath us and help us in the right direction, in the right way, right? You can't choose your family. If you were to face a situation like I just described, financial, illness, marital, any of those things, if you were to face a situation like that, is there a group of people in your life right now that if they were to ask you, are you okay, they won't accept I'm fine as an answer? If they know something's going on, they're not going to accept I'm fine as an answer. Do you have a group of people in your life right now that if they asked you, are you okay? And you said, oh yeah, I'm fine, but they know something's up, they're not going to accept that as an answer. If you were to fall in your marriage, if you were to have a financial crisis, an illness, is there a group of people already in place to help you up? Because Solomon says this, pity the individual who falls through no fault of their own, but something goes wrong in their life, they fall and there's no one to help them up. You see, relationship is where falling people get the help they need. The problem is when people come to church on Sunday morning only. You see, on Sunday morning, you aren't going to be able to build the kind of relationships you'll need to get through those crisis times of life. I'm not knocking Sunday morning, please believe me. I love Sunday mornings. I spend a lot of time working on what happens on Sunday morning, okay? But you have to understand that the purpose of Sunday morning is not about you guys building relationships with each other. If it was, we'd be doing this a whole lot differently, right? We would have round tables. I might give a little message, and then I'd send you to your tables and have discussion and all that kind. I mean, that would be what we would do, right? But instead, we're in rows, right? And we have worship and all these things. And it's like, what is all that about? The reason is that Sunday morning is about your relationship with Him. You see, we want you to make a connection with God and deepen that relationship. That's what Sunday morning is all about. It's not about this. Although this happens, right? You guys do get relationships, and we do have you shake hands, and sometimes you guys go to lunch together after and all that, and that's great. But if you really want to know what Sunday morning is about, it's not about you getting together with each other and building relationship. It's about you building a relationship with Him. And us coming together and worshiping Him. You see, something happens when we come together as a body and we worship God. God begins to manifest His presence. You may have experienced that. Maybe you came in one Sunday, maybe you felt it today, where you just felt the presence of God. You see, when we come together and worship together, that's what happens. That's why we do the way we do, right? But our goal is not for you guys to come together and build these deep relationships on Sunday morning. That's for a different time, right? That's why we do life groups, so that you can build relationships with each other. Can you just imagine? Think about this for a moment. Can you just imagine if you went around shaking people's hands on Sunday morning, and somebody came up to you, you didn't know them that well, you're shaking your hand, and you go, "Hey, how are you today?" And they said, "You know what? I was diagnosed with cancer. I have 2 more years to live." Wouldn't that be awkward? I mean, it would blow you away. You'd just be like, what was your name again? You know, I mean, because that's not what it's designed to do here on Sunday morning. And it's not that we don't want you to share those things. But it becomes awkward because there's no relationship. It's not designed for that. And suddenly, this person is thrown off. They don't know what to do. How do I help this person? I wasn't expecting this. And that's why I want you to see, I want to use that as an example to show you guys, Sunday morning isn't about you guys coming together. It's something different. That's for a different time. Of course we're going to care about you. Of course I want all of you guys to hang out with each other and greet each other and love on each other on Sunday morning. Please understand that. I do. But you have to understand the intent of Sunday morning is not that. And so you're not going to have that deepness on a Sunday morning that you need. You're not going to experience that care that you need on Sunday morning. That's what groups are about. So he says this, "Pity the one who falls and has no one to help them up." And then he continues, he says this, "Though one may be overpowered, 2 can defend themselves." Now, basically, he kind of changes the imagery here, and he goes on from somebody who just falls down to someone who is overpowered. At some point in your life, in my life, because of a season in life, because of something we don't anticipate, because of something someone does to us, we are going to feel overwhelmed. Overwhelmed. And Solomon says this, when you feel overwhelmed, you will respond to the overwhelming circumstances of life better if there is someone there to walk with you through it. If you have somebody there with you, walking with you through that. Because at some point, we're all going to feel overwhelmed. And then he says this. He says something that brings some really powerful imagery to this. And he says this, though one may be overpowered, two can defend themselves. Then he continues with this, a cord of 3 strands is not quickly broken. There are so many people who have gone through extraordinarily difficult and tough times, but have not been broken because they had people who were walking through it by their side. Alone, they would have been broken and defeated, but instead they were able to get through because they had people standing with them. That's the power of having a group of friends that will care for you. And what Solomon alludes to in this passage is simply this. At some point in our lives, we all need somebodies, right? We all need those somebodies who will lift us up, who will care for us, who will carry us during that difficult time. Whether it's because of decisions we make, whether it's because of just circumstances that are out of our control, or whether it's somebody does something to us, we are going to need people in our life to help us through. And he says this, he says, I pity the person when they fall, there is no one there to help them up. This is why groups are so important. But there's something else important about groups. They have the potential to keep you from falling or keep you from being overpowered in the first place. Groups can be preventative. They are preventative because at some point in our lives, we all need somebody who can say, who can see what we can't see, right? They can see what we can't see. We need somebody who can see it coming. Now maybe you're wondering what it is. So let me ask you, how many times have you ever been with a family who has younger kids than you, and you watch how they treat their younger kids, how they discipline them, or maybe how they don't discipline them, right? And you can see it coming. You know what's going to happen. You know the end result. You can see it coming. These kids are going to be this. They're going to do this because of how these parents are responding. You can see it coming. The parents can't see it coming, but you can see it coming. Or how many times have you been with a couple and you listen to the way that the way he talks to her, the way the husband talks to his wife, and you're looking at him and you're going, I can see it coming, man. I can see it coming. You can't see it coming, but I can see it coming. You're in trouble. Your marriage is going to be in trouble if that continues. How many of you have been around a couple and you've seen how she talks to him? And she's disrespectful, or she dismisses him, and you're like, I can see it coming. I know what's coming. Every single one of us has been with people, we look into their lives, and it's so easy to see what's going to happen. It's not that we have a crystal ball. It's just we can see what they can't. We have experienced things in our life that maybe they haven't yet. And we can see it coming. Well, in the same way, there are people who can look at you and look at your marriage, and they can see it coming. And the great thing about groups is it's actually preventative. Because somebody can see it coming and they get to point it out. They get to point it out to you. Now, I know that doesn't sound fun, right? You're like, I don't know if I want to be in a group now. I don't want nobody pointing anything out. But here's the thing. You need it to be pointed out. I need it to be pointed out. Because if we don't get it pointed out, what they see coming is going to happen. We need it in order to grow. In order to mature, we need people who have permission to speak into our life and say, listen, I love you. But you need to realize how you're treating her, it's going to end badly. You need to change. You need to work on this. One of the great things about group life is if there's something coming, you're in an environment where a group of people who love you and care about you will find over time the permission to speak into your life. To say, listen, this is what I see. This is what's going to happen. You need to change. It's awkward. I feel awkward telling you. But I just want to tell you what I see coming so that you can change it. I don't know how many times as a pastor I've been able to do that with people. I've been able to build a relationship with them and I'm like, hey, listen, I just want to tell you, man, how you're treating her, that's not good. And they listen and they change and it changes the direction of the marriage. Let me say this to all the singles in the room. There are things in your life, if you're single today, whether it's your college age, even high school, or maybe you recently divorced, whatever it might be, or a widow or widower, there are things in your life as a single that you will never deal with until you're married. You don't know what they are, or you would have already dealt with them. Okay? There are things in your life that you won't deal with as a single person until you finally get married. But when you're single, the great thing about being single is you can do whatever you want, right? I mean, if you don't like that roommate, you just get a new roommate, right? They have a problem with you or how you do this or that. Hey, I'll get a new one, right? But many of us have things that we will never work on until we have to, until we get into a relationship. The problem is that if you wait until you get married to deal with those issues, it can cause a lot of strain in your marriage. How many of you married people can raise your hand and say, amen, pastor, right? Never mind. Yeah, I can see nobody wants to do that because their spouse is sitting there. I get it. Let me tell you. Let me tell you about my marriage for a moment. Yeah. I'm going to tell you about my wife and all her problems. No, I'm just kidding. I'm not going to do that. I want to live through the day. I am actually, if you don't know this, I'm actually a messy person. I'm not like extreme messy, but I am messy, okay? In college, my friend... I'm glad my wife is leaving right now. Anyway, in college, my friends would laugh because we had this rule in my dorm room with my roommates where we had a trash can underneath the sink, right? And we'd throw our trash in there, and then I think it was like every week we would rotate whose turn it was to take that and go empty it in the dumpster. Well, I always put that out of my mind. It's like, that's not my priority, whatever. And so I always just assumed it was their job. It was their turn. And so it would come to my turn, and I'd be like, it can't be my turn again, right? This is happening way too often, people. And so, you know what my solution was? And they laughed. I went out and got a bigger box, right? I just got a bigger box, and I was like, okay, now we're good, It won't come as often where I have to empty this thing. Hey, I'm done, right? And they would laugh. They're like, you know what? If you don't empty that, we're going to dump it on your bed. And I'm like, all right. But that was me, right? And I didn't have to worry about it. They're my roommates. They're going to be gone. They're not going to be staying in my life forever. And it's like, whatever. Well, then I get married, right? That doesn't fly, right? It's cute in the beginning, but then, hey, this isn't working out, you know? And my wife, she gets upset about that, which absolutely rightfully so, right? And I have to realize I have to change. I have to change how I do things. And I'm going to tell you right now, I'm not perfect. I have not perfected this. I have not arrived. I am a work in progress. But I have gotten better, and I'm glad she's not in here to call me a heretic. But seriously, I believe in myself that I have gotten better. I do the dishes. I will pick up. Where before, it was like, that's just like the last thing on my list, and I won't do it unless I absolutely have to. Now I do. I force myself because I know it can be a bone of contention in my marriage, right? But you see, I didn't deal with that until I got married. And until we had those fights or those arguments or whatever, you know? And that's the problem. Being in a group is one of the most powerful things you can do to prepare for your relational future, whether you get married or not. Because here's what we married people have figured out. People with issues get married. And when you're single, there's no one who can force you to deal with the thing that may be an obstacle in your relationship later on. But if you are in a good small group, somebody can see it coming. And in a good small group, they're going to say something. Hey, John, you really got to work on that. Yeah, it's you know, it bothers me but a little bit, but man, it's going to bother your wife if you can't clean up, right? If you can't start making that a priority. That's going to really bother whoever you marry, right? Whatever it is, whatever the issue is, they can see it coming and they can call you on it and say, hey, listen, we love you. Or I love you, but this needs to be worked on. Now let me say something to all the married couples in the room. There are things in our marriage that we can't see, but others can see. There are things your spouse sees, but you can't see. Husbands, there are things your wife can see that you can't hear her, okay? You're oblivious. And wives, there are things your husband sees and he's like, no way, I brought that up once. I'm not going there again. Let's go to small group, right? So that can be brought up there because I'm not going there, right? There are things that others see. There are things that you can't see. Every marriage needs some support now to avoid the need for life support later. How many divorces could have been prevented if there was a group of friends that could have seen it coming and said something early? Think about that just for a moment. If there was a group of friends who could have seen it coming and said something early, think about the divorces that could have been avoided. I remember in my previous church sitting down with a couple. Divorce was talked about. And this was a prominent couple. We're talking, at one point they were board members. This was going to rock the church. It was going to rock them. It was incredible. And I sat them down in my office and we just began to talk. And I began to share things that I saw. I began to let them talk with each other, with me just mediating, and the whole thing turned around relatively quickly. They had me to come to. Now I'm the pastor, right? That's my job, right? I'm there for you guys, and that's great. But you know what? It doesn't always have to be me. There are other people in this room that can see things like that coming and can give you the help that you need. But imagine what would have happened if I hadn't been there. If I hadn't been there to see what they needed me to see, to help them to connect the dots and turn that corner. What would have happened? How many divorces could be avoided if we just had that group of people, that group of friends that could see it coming and had permission to talk about it with us? There are things that you will never have to face. There are things you may never have to feel. There are problems that you will be better equipped to deal with if you are in a group of people who are opening God's Word together, taking some of the concepts we talk about at church on Sunday and applying to your life. Think about that. See, that's the problem. You never know what really was prevented, right? That's one of the problems. You know, we can't say, well, we totally prevented so-and-so from getting a divorce because they were in a small group. I can't say that because it was prevented. We don't know what was prevented. But it is preventative. Groups can be preventative. But here's the thing. Groups are preventative, but they're like retirement savings. If you wait until you need it, you won't have it. You need community, and community takes time. That's why it's like retirement savings. When you need it, if you haven't developed it all along the way, it won't be there for you. So we want every single one of you to have a group of people so that if and when you fall, there will be somebody to pick you up. And if and when you find yourself overwhelmed with life, there will be somebody to walk with you through those times. And there will be those somebodies who can see things that you can't and call you on it and say, hey, I can see it coming. You need to change direction. Small groups are about building care for you and having an opportunity for you to care for others. But listen to me carefully. Maybe you're here and you're like, Pastor, great, you're really pushing these groups, and man, listen, you don't have to be a part of a small group here in this church. I hope that you are. That's why we're designing them. That's why we're launching them. Because for all these reasons that I've talked about. But if for some reason you can't be in a group, I don't know, maybe scheduling wise, whatever, you know what? The principles still apply. You need to gather around you some people that will care for you, that you are building a relationship with, that will have permission to speak into your life, that will help carry you through those difficult times. So whether you ever join one of our life groups, that's not really what this message is about. Yes, I want you to, and yes, I'm trying to encourage you to do this because I see the value of it. But if you can't join our small groups, that's okay. You need to realize that you need people in your life. People like what we're talking about. And the reason I say that is because that's what Solomon says. Right? He's giving us wisdom, and it's coming from the Bible. And he says, listen, two are better than one. And pity the person that falls and has no one to help them up. This is just common sense. Whether you ever join one of our life groups, you need people in your life that will help you, that will care for you, that will lift you up. Let me ask you this. Let me ask you about your own story. So many of us have come from broken homes. If I asked you to raise your hand, I think there would be hands all over this place about people who grew up in a broken home. Let me ask you a question. Imagine the difference it would have made if your father and mother had been in community. Not just at church, not just attending church on Sunday, but they had been with a small group who saw it coming and said something. Think about how different your life would have been if they had been in that kind of a setting. If they were in this group of people When they hit this bump that ultimately drove them apart, there had been a group of people who cared enough and had permission to say something to them. Imagine what you might have avoided if they had been in that kind of situation. That's the power of groups. They're preventative. It's not just about, when you're going through something, then you join a group. You join the group, and then you have it when you need it, right? It's preventative. Not only that, but they can see things coming. How would your life be different if the people that you cared about, the people in your life, had been in that kind of a setting? A group of people that cared for them and saw it coming.